Today we're flipping the script on something we talked about last time. You remember how we dove into why James Bond would actually make a terrible spy in real life? Now let's turn the tables and look at the other side, those iconic James Bond villains. In the movies, they're larger-than-life schemers with grand plans to take over the world, backed by gadgets, henchmen, secret layers, and billions of dollars. They're captivating to watch, no doubt, they're loads of fun, but these guys, as real-life criminals or masterminds, they'd be absolute disasters at it. Stick around as I break it all down. Let's kick off with one of the biggest and most well-known blunders, the monologuing. Bond villains love to capture 007, hold him prisoner, or worse, treat him like a guest, and then spill the beans on every detail of their master plan like they're giving a TED Talk on world domination. It's dramatic, sure, and it lets the audience in on the stakes of the situation, but in real life, it's a fast track to failure. Criminals who succeed keep their mouths shut. Loose lips sink ships, as they say. During the heyday of organized crime in the 20th century, bosses ran empires by staying silent and letting actions speak. No grand speeches to captives. In Goldfinger, the villain literally explains the entire scheme to nuke Fort Knox while Bond is strapped to a table with a laser creeping up. Why not just finish the job? I can imagine his henchmen rolling their eyes. Boss, you got him. We should just shoot him. But no, it's time to monologue again. Real crooks and bad guys would skip the chit-chat, one word too many, and they're done. James Bond villains treat exposition like it's part of the job description, giving the hero all the time he needs to escape. It's like they're allergic to efficiency. You know what, if you were going to monologue, maybe wait until after you've already succeeded, and then explain to people that you trust what you did. Let's talk about those elaborate death traps. Instead of a quick, simple end, these villains stick Bond in some ridiculous setup, like a shark tank, a spinning astronaut G-force trainer thingy, a conveyor belt of doom, underneath the launch pad of a space shuttle. Entertaining on screen, but in the real world, that's begging for a comeback. Successful criminals are all about the quick, clean work, no room for showboating. You shoot your opponent, you shank him in jail, you run him over with a car and get away, you do something. You don't set up a goofy, elaborate trap like it's the 1960s Batman show. Think about how the underworld networks worked during the Prohibition era. They dealt with threats fast, without flair. In Dr. No, a tarantula, expecting that to do the trick. A tarantula, come on. That's like trying to off somebody with a mildly annoyed house cat. Bond just brushes it off and keeps going. I would think that real bad guys know that complicating things unnecessarily can lead to failure. Bond villains seem to think the more elaborate, the more mechanized, the better the villainy. Let's talk about their grand plans. These things are always overly complicated to the point of absurdity. World domination via weird machines, lasers, irradiating gold so that your gold becomes more valuable. It's ambitious, yeah, but real criminal enterprises thrive on simplicity, smuggle things, extort, launder. During the Cold War, rogue operators or syndicates build fortunes by sticking to straightforward schemes that didn't require a PhD in evil engineering. In The Spy Who Loved Me, the villain wants to wipe out humanity with stolen nuclear weapons to start an underwater civilization. Underwater? With what, fishy real estate? That's not a plan, that's a midlife crisis with submarines. James Bond foils it because it's ridiculous, with too many moving parts. Real submarines, kidnapped crews, a giant lair. I can see his minions at a meeting. Boss, couldn't we just rob a bank instead? Less chance of drowning. Real crooks keep it simple to minimize risks. Planning, for sure, but the planning has to be concise and logical. Bond villains pile on complexity upon complexity just for the sake of complexity. And we have to talk about the bad guy layers. These hidden bases are always flashy fortresses, volcano hideouts, underwater palaces, orbiting space stations. Cool visuals, but in reality, that's a neon sign saying, "Raid me now." Smart criminals use unassuming spots, warehouses, basements, ordinary office buildings that blend in, historical crime rings in those big cities post-World War II hid in plain sight to avoid detection. No need for a moat with alligators and lasers. In You Only Live Twice, the villain had a whole volcano base with a rocket launch pad. A volcano? That's like building your hideout in a fireworks factory. Bond infiltrates it easily because it's so over the top and ridiculous. Imagine the construction crew. We're putting a helipad where? And the piranha pool? This is going to cost extra for hazard pay. Real villains prioritize discretion. Bond's foes build mountains to their egos, and I don't think that would work out very well. Now let's touch on their gadgets and tech. James Bond uses his own gadgets, and the villains do as well. Bond villains love outfitting themselves and their goons with wild inventions, like killer hats, metal teeth, or poison-tipped shoes. I visited the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. a while back, and they have some fascinating exhibits on real adversarial tools from history, subtle things like cyanide capsules or disguising weapons that don't draw attention. One of the things on display was just a mailbox where Soviet spies would put chalk marks on to send messages. Nothing over the top, nothing like the circus acts in Bond films. In Goldfinger, there's Oddjob with his razor-brimmed hat that he throws like a frisbee. That's fun to watch, but in a real fight, that thing's gonna get stuck in the wall while you're left hatless and vulnerable. Or Jaws and the Spy Who Loved Me with his steel teeth. Great for biting cables, I suppose, but how does he eat a sandwich? Let's talk about the henchmen. These poor saps are always quirky sidekicks, one-trick ponies like super strength, weird weapon, but zero brains. Villains rely on them for everything, yet they're comically incompetent. In real criminal operations, underlings are trained, loyal, and efficient. They wouldn't get to be in the position if they weren't good at their jobs. Villain bosses don't hire clowns. Like there's a guy in Live and Let Die who had a claw hand. Sure, that's fine, but that's really his only shtick. He had a claw hand. I have nothing against people with amputated limbs, but that's not really a job qualification either. And finally, there's the weird habit of having Bond socialize with them. Dinner parties, card games, golf outings. It's like they're trying to be friends with him rather than kill him. It's bizarre. Real criminals don't socialize with threats, they eliminate them from afar. In Goldfinger, the villain plays golf with James Bond, knowing that James Bond is a spy. It makes absolutely no sense. He takes James Bond into Fort Knox with him while he's doing his bad guy plot. Why take James Bond with you? That makes absolutely no sense. Well, there you have it, folks. Bond villains are mesmerizing on the screen with their flair and their schemes, but in the real world of crime, they'd be epic failures. Actual criminals succeed through silence, simplicity, smarts, not spectacle. The movies amp up the absurdity for our enjoyment, and that's a good thing. And that's why we love them so much. But if these villains were real, they'd be bankrupt or behind bars in no time. Don't get me wrong, I understand that it's all for fun, and I love it. What are some of your favorite villains in the James Bond movies or in the wider world of movies? Thanks for sticking with me on this one, folks. Drop a comment down below, and if you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe button. Eric Wilford Watson, signing out.